Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer, the greatest professional wrestler of all time, your friend and mine, Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Oh, Conrad Thompson. Oh, man. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you're listening to this, My World listeners, I'm fired up. What an incredible workout I just had this morning, coming off a victorious weekend. We'll get into that in a minute. But no, Conrad, as you can imagine, I'd never had, we'll go back 2 years ago. Ric Flair's last match, certainly didn't have that on my bucket list. And we could name a few different things since we started this pod. Didn't have items on my bucket list. But the opportunity I have on Dynamite this week, not sure how to put it in words, but feel good. Fantastic workout, good weekend, good weather, the dog days of summer, which I absolutely love, the heat. And Connie, before we rolled, for those audio listeners, they won't get to get a peek of this, but our YouTube listeners on myworldpod.com, go subscribe and like. Connie's got a bit of a red face. Not red ass, but a little red face. You've been out in the sun this weekend, haven't you, my friend?
Yes, sir. I got a little bit of sun over the weekend, but I wasn't in that W column like you were. You said you had a victorious weekend. What's going on? What'd you do this weekend?
Listen, I look. My man Codes, our guy, Conrad, I don't want to get too deep into him, but I just took him to the woodshed multiple times.
Wait, are you still playing that young man at NCAA and you're beating him now?
No, well, truth be known, we're about 500. He win a game, I win a game.
Okay.
But he likes, his memory is the short. It's like it doesn't exist when he gets beat. When he wins, he's got the photo out. He's taking a picture. He's putting it on the Instagram story. Oh, my man's a character, but
he gets it from his daddy. I'm just saying, you accentuate the positives, hide the negatives. I've been to your house. I've been to Castle Jarrett, or what do we want to call it? Jefe de Jarrett, whatever you got up there. And boy, it's just a shrine. You know, there's hoods of cars and broken guitars and championship belts. I looked everywhere. I didn't see any big life-size standees of you covered in flour after China took you to the woodshed. Didn't see that anywhere.
Of course you would come back that way.
Didn't see it. Not one time. Maybe it's downstairs. I was never invited downstairs.
His new favorite team is the Buffalo, but their logo is a Brahma Bull. So,
oh gosh, he's all wrestling everything. I love him.
Everything dials into wrestling. And of course, Roman came back this weekend, the final boss. But who do you think the final boss is in college football? Cody. He's something, buddy. He loves that game. Those video games. That dude is a gamer. He'll stay up all hours of the night. I said, Codes, I got to go to bed, but he's into it. But a lot of fun, Connie. Big week coming up. Big month coming up. Triple Mania.
Hang on, time out. I want us to cover some things and then we'll shift gears again. But I do want to talk about SummerSlam because you brought it up. I'm never sure. Are we allowed to talk about SummerSlam? Are we not? So I do want to talk about it. But first, I want to mention something that happened last week. And no, I'm not talking about the 2-year anniversary of Ric Flair's last match. I'm talking about you sitting down and chopping it up with a friend of ours. Well, I guess he's really a friend of yours. I don't know if I can trust this guy or what's really going on with him. I was once described by JR as suspect at best, just because I was friends with Ric Flair. And now, of course, JR and I are pals, and he found out maybe I'm not the one that's suspect in that triangle. But anyway, Ben Bishop hooked up with you, and we got together and talked about the importance of social media. And you've often said something that I've repeated. I would say in my sales career, you got to be easy to buy from. You would say same thing, said differently. If you confuse them, you lose them. And you talked a little bit with Ben Bishop last week about wrestlers and young wrestlers and advice you could impart on them. And we've got a clip here from adfreeshows.com.
But the big thing that I try to say is, like, you want to have a brand purpose, because at the end of the day, your Twitter, your social media, everything about it is your brand. And if you don't have a purpose, you don't have a content plan, or you don't have like an idea of what you want to get across, it's harder for people to follow you. Because it's harder for people to understand you. Because if 1 second Big Trouble Ben Bishop. Next second, I told you I played it for Mike. You can look up my name. I'm Ben Cranka, and I'm towing the line of like when the character comes and when I'm not, when I'm my real person. And then it's like, well, what are we getting? What are we getting? And that's when people start to like tune out a bit. And I used to do that, and then it doesn't work. And after a year, I'm just like, I've learned from guys who've done social media. It's like, you got to have a brand, you got to have a purpose, you got to have something that you're going towards. So that's something I would tell people. It's like, have that. What are you trying to get across? What is your brand? What are you trying to do on social media?
The old promoter analogy or slogan: if you confuse them, you lose them.
Exactly. That's perfect. There you go.
There you go. All these nuggets and more behind the paywall over at adfreeshows.com. Not only do you get extra episodes and bonus content from Jeff and my world, but from all my other podcasts, as well as exclusive series you can't see anywhere else. Series with Sam Adonis, where he's trying to help us learn lucha, where we break down nostalgia matches and angles and stories with Tully Blanchard for Tully Vision, where we answer your questions from the third man in the ring, whether it's Mike Chioda or Nick Patrick. Whether you're a WWF fan or a WCW fan, they shared the ring for most of your favorite memories. Speaking of memories, we don't have to rely on our memory. We've got Jim Crockett Jr.'s Red Books with the excellent penmanship of J.J. Dillon and the genius booking mind of Dusty Rhodes. The creation of the Great American Bash Tour and so much more are in these episodes that we call The Book, where we sit down with a member of David Crockett's Royal Wrestling family. And how about Pod Ain't Easy, brand new series featuring The Godfather hanging out with Cassio Kid, talking about yesteryear, having a few laughs along the way. And even Lex Luger, the total package, Lex Expressed, has an exclusive series. All told, it's more than 100,000 hours worth of bonus content at adfreeshows.com. Check it out. You'll be glad you did. That's adfreeshows.com. Jeff, I love you doling out wrestler advice. And I do like the idea of having that conversation with Big Trouble Ben Bishop, because I think sometimes we sort of overthink things a little bit. You need to start with the end in mind in any goal, right? Like if you had a weight loss goal or an income goal, you know what the big number is, but how do we get there? Maybe if we could be a little more purposeful with our actions, maybe we could all start with the end in mind.
Conrad, I don't believe, as I've said lots of times, don't believe in coincidence, only convergences. Just no more than 90 minutes ago, I was in the gym and a guy, I don't want to call it workout advice, but I just said, hey, man, figure out your why, and the how solves itself in a lot of ways. Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to get in shape? All this kind of stuff. So that man, Big Ben Bishop, I enjoyed the hell out of it. And I said that probably 3 or 4 times on the bonus hour, but having a conversation with him, and he would chuckle at this or maybe others, I learned a lot kind of by listening to him, just kind of his take. He's mid-30s, master's degree. He's quote unquote got a 9-to-5 job. He's an executive, loves his wrestling, wants to figure it out, really got a passion for it. But kind of the different perspectives. But I think we've all both landed, and on the bonus hour, is that social media is because it's such a diverse audience. Why do people go on there? Well, there's a multitude of reasons. Some people entertainment, some people news, some people like to get on there to argue. Some people like to get on there and we'll call it, maybe they're casual fans, or they're hardcore fans, or they're old school fans, or they're WWE fans, or AEW fans, or TNA, or NW, whatever it may be. But if you try to worry about all of that, you kind of got to be true to yourself and figure out, what do I want to accomplish? So why am I on here? And it was a fun chat. It really, really was. And Connie, you kind of struck gold to me, for a wrestling fan, for an actual wrestler, promoter, or anybody who just wants to really understand the DNA of wrestling. You hit on gold several years ago. It's still amazing to me. Over 100,000 hours of content. Anyway, Connie, it was a great conversation. A lot of fun with that guy. He's quirky, to say the least. But Big Ben, keep on keeping on. I'll just say that.
Check it out if you haven't already. It's adfreeshows.com. Jeff, over the weekend, there was a big little wrestling event they held for themselves at the Cleveland Browns Stadium. It was a huge event. SummerSlam is now in the books. And of course, we know this might have been the last one-night SummerSlam. Next year, SummerSlam will be a two-night affair. You and I haven't spent much time talking about the business implications there. We know once upon a time, the Tokyo Dome event became a two-night affair for New Japan. So they had Wrestle Kingdom night 1 and 2. And then the world changed because of the pandemic. And we had a sort of a closed set. We saw a WrestleMania from the Performance Center, and it became a two-night WrestleMania by accident. But now we've just sort of kept that going. And now it's bleeding over to other pay-per-views. A two-night SummerSlam. I think this is the beginning of a new trend. I do think eventually there will be a two-night Royal Rumble. We'll have a Ladies Rumble on one night and one world title match. And then the next night, sort of the same thing. Okay. I think this is the new precedent that's going to be set. And it's going to mean a lot more money and a lot more opportunity and a lot more revenue for the community. What do you think of a potential paradigm shift? We're going to make these major tentpole events, whether it's WrestleMania and now SummerSlam, two-night events. What do you think, Jeff?
I'll let you give away the topic. Today's topic is going to be right in line. This is almost like a precursor. You're teeing me up because where we're at today, but it just feels not that long ago, like you said, that doing a stadium show was monumental. WrestleMania is going to a stadium show. It feels like now, and I know we've been doing it a while, or it's been going on a while, but the two-night event, and let's not forget SmackDown and Raw in the different cases, or the Dynamites and Collisions and, the regular flagship shows, but a two-night event, it is such, I guess in a way, a footprint that where professional wrestling stands in the entertainment sphere. And, Kenny Chesney was just in town, Conrad, doing down at Titan Stadium. He had a stadium show. There's Morgan Wallen over the weekend. He made news for unique reasons, but he's out on a stadium tour. There's a lot of different stadium tours and live events and big deals, but professional wrestling, content is king. But when you I don't know if you saw my eyes when you went down the road of Royal Rumble going to two nights. So Royal Rumble, two nights in the future. SummerSlam's already going to be. Everything you said, the revenue is going to be generated, but I guess the opportunities to, my man Jelly Roll was on this weekend, just to integrate so many different avenues. Yes, the wrestling is the core, and that's the content, and that's why at the end of the day, all eyes will always point to that main event payoff, if you will, in the ring. We'll get to that in a second, but a two-night SummerSlam or just a two-night stadium event in professional wrestling, who would have thought? And it feels like things are getting quicker and faster, and the business is expanding just at breakneck speed because we hadn't even really touched on the global aspect. When we're going to Wembley at the end of this month for the second year. Oh man, Conrad, does that turn?
Think about that, Jeff. I don't mean to cut you off, but you had inside of the course of a calendar month. When we look back at the end of this month, we're going to look back and we're going to see that both WWE and AEW had north of 50,000 people in the stadium in the same calendar month. Yes. I don't think anything like that has ever happened in wrestling before with two domestic companies. Now, I know that people are going to say, well, there was a Wrestle Kingdom that had so many, and there was a Royal Rumble that had so many in January. I hear you. But I'm saying even at the height of the Monday Night Wars with WWF versus WCW, there was never a time where we had two shows that big, stadium shows, monster shows from both brands. Now, yes, we had big old Nitros that had 30 or 40,000 people there. But I'm saying a big event like this in the same calendar month, I don't think it's happened before. I mean, I could be wrong, and I'm sure I'll get fact checked, but it really just stuck out as I was watching SummerSlam, I was like, wait a minute, we're only 3 weeks away from this stadium show of All In. And by the way, 4 weeks after SummerSlam is another stadium show for WWE, Bash at Berlin. So we're going to have inside of a month period there, really 3 stadium shows, 2 for WWE and 1 for AEW.
Stadium?
Yeah.
That's where we're at, pal. In Triple Mania, August 17th. It's not a stadium, but Arena Mexico. What do they call that? See you die.
You know what? You're correct. My apologies. There's only 17,000 seats at the Uber Arena. So
I was thinking that, but still.
Yeah, it's a 1 week after. You're saying,
the global aspect's where I'm going with it.
Yes, just the revenue generated from both companies on just a handful of dates. I mean, it really is. We're in a wrestling renaissance of sorts right now, and I saw some critiques and some criticisms. I think someone over at the Observer said something along the lines of, when there's an AEW pay-per-view, you're going to get 3 or 4 really incredible matches. Whereas on a WWE pay-per-view, maybe the match quality isn't as good, but the fans are really at the edge of their seat for the story. And I know AEW has story, and we're not trying to have that sort of negative conversation. I'm just saying they delivered on a lot of story at SummerSlam. I'm curious if you saw it and what you thought of some of the payoffs and some of the twists and turns along the way.
Well, of course, Cody. I mean, Conrad, if Cody's in my house, what do you think?
You're watching it, yeah.
It is on, and it's fascinating to watch him watch, because he'll get into things, and then he'll get up and, hey, I'm going to go in my room. Hey, Dad, tell me when so-and-so comes on, and I won't get into who he taps in and out of, but it is fascinating. And then maybe he's not into the beginning of the match, and he'll walk back in. But, he was waiting, obviously, on the big payoff. He was waiting to kind of see the Punk Drew evolution, if you will. You just said something to the effect that the payoff on the stories, the next step. Oh, Dom, that character development. He's so relatable, Conrad. You just want to smack his jaws off. Anyway, it's characters. It's all character. But I enjoyed it. I mean, it is. I like the spectacle, and of course, I'm looking at the business aspect of it, and that's an NFL stadium. And I don't even know the backstory, how they landed from a business deal, how they landed in Cleveland. I know Minneapolis has got big stuff coming up, and we're making announcements, and just it's. Can
I give you a spoiler? I believe.
Yeah,
it all comes down to business, baby. JR would tell us it's all about cash and creative. I have a feeling if WWE is running a stadium show in your town, there are a lot of incentives from the local community.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the Browns owned by a Tennessean family. So where does the city land all that? And the organization, Absolute Intense Wrestling, that went up and took Nathan Segura to the woodshed. They had shoulder program around it, and at Cleveland Live, and it's just such an economic impact when these big events roll in. It's good for everybody. Absolutely good for everybody. But a good show. Back to your original question.
We know that Roman Reigns is back. We know that Gunther is now the world champion. It looks like we've seen the Judgment Day break up. Rhea Ripley is now firmly a babyface, and I suppose so is Roman Reigns and Damian Priest. And the story goes on. Lots of fun stories happening, and our topic today is going to cover, pretty much all the major news stories from 1987. But before we talk about our topic today, we need to remind everybody that as folks are listening to this, it's a Tuesday, and tomorrow night, you're going to be on primetime television wrestling someone who you have said many times, just as a fan of professional wrestling, that you feel like he is at the top of his game, that perhaps Bryan Danielson is the best in-ring storyteller and professional wrestler in the game today. You hold him in that high of regard, and now you're going to step between the ropes against that fellow in prime time tomorrow. And as if that wasn't enough, we got a little special guest in Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. And of course, we know he is one of the most famous, maybe the most famous opponent of a guy who you held in the highest regard, one of your favorite wrestlers when you were first breaking in, the Macho Man Randy Savage. Those guys made history together. You're going to write another chapter in your history tomorrow night on AEW television. Tickets are on sale now for Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Go see Jeff live, AEWTIX.com. Jeff, what's going through your mind as you're just hours away from wrestling the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson?
If you saw, whether live or on social media, the bit where Bryan smacked my hat out of my hands and more or less challenged me to a match, that look or that feeling on my face was identical to when I actually found out about it. That was I didn't even have to play an extension of a part of my personality. That was as emotional, and because Conrad, I mean, he's headed to a main event, the main event at Wembley, challenging for a world title, and you just laid out exactly how I feel about Bryan personally and professionally. I've just got a load of respect because what is Bryan, 5'8"? And I don't want to shortchange him or overbill it, but let's just say he's not the tallest guy. He's not the biggest guy. I wouldn't say that you would say, man, oh man, there's Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, Jerry Lawler, Terry Funk, and Bryan Danielson. Those are great promo guys. No disrespect but so I'm saying all that to say what Bryan can do with his artistic ability when the bell rings has continually amazed me. To the point that sometimes I just marvel at his ability. He's hard hitting. He will knock your freaking head off. He cares about the business. He is the essence of what is good about this industry. And I guess above all, when I step into the ring tomorrow night, I have got a healthy respect for him. And I know that having that healthy respect for him will lead me down a path that I will leave nothing on the table. I'm going to come in him with everything I got. I know that I don't get these kind of opportunities. I am incredibly blessed to be getting these kind of opportunities. And I can assure you, Connie, I am going to make the absolute most of this opportunity. I could throw on the tights and step in the ring right now, but I am super fired up on his path to Wembley. Karen, Sanjay, Jay, Satnam, we have our group texts, and last week when we all kind of sat down and digested, this is the way we're going. I had no idea about Steamboat. I found that out just about real time as well. It's big, Conrad. It's really, really big for me. And I'm, like I said, I'm celebrated my birthday early this month. I won't talk about the number because that's putting it out in the universe, but I'm 29 and holding. And so, but I'm fired up, Conrad. I am going to make the most of this opportunity.
When you think about what you're going to be wrestling for, I mean, you've wrestled for the world title, you've wrestled for number one contender matches, you've wrestled to keep your job, you've wrestled for intercontinental championships and tag team gold and King of the Mountain trophies. And what do you think you're wrestling for tomorrow night? Like, what's your real motivation? I mean, I know you sort of alluded to the fact that, maybe you're on the downhill slide of your career as far as you didn't think you'd be wrestling at this point, but you are. And you've sort of, we heard you make the analogy before when you were wrestling Hangman, referencing your old pal, Toby Keith, that maybe you're not as, well, the expression. What are you wrestling for? What does this match mean to you tomorrow night?
And to finish that line, ain't as good as I once was, but I'm good once. as I ever was. Sometimes, what is that saying, Conrad? Art imitates life.
Yep.
Then life imitates art. We'll call it the storyline, for the lack of a better words, is that Brian, it's no secret, he wants, for a multitude of reasons, for his full-time career, he's not retiring, but his full-time in-ring career to basically end. But he wants to go out with a bang, and I get that. He has been in AEW, been a pillar of the organization in a multitude of ways. And so he has his well-known health issues, and I'll say his not so well-known health issues. And so he initiated this in every imaginable way, which to me says a lot. And so I'm going into this to do everything I can. And you can read into this any way you want to, or a number of ways you want to. I'm going to do everything in my power to get Bryan Danielson one step closer to winning the world title at Wembley. Everything. So why am I doing it? I'm doing it for Bryan.
Tomorrow night, AEW Dynamite live. You don't want to miss it. I know I won't. And pull for Double J. It's going to be weird not for me to watch and not be rooting for you to give someone a guitar necklace. But
buddy,
you never know.
You can cheer for that.
We're going to talk a little bit about 1987 here today, but before we do, I want to remind you that man, August is here. School is back. You know, the weather's still warm outside, and now you got to run all these kids around, right? I mean, how are you going to make time for car line, after school activity, work? Oh, and we still have, you know, this summer months to go enjoy ourselves. Well, the result is we don't have any time to waste at home, and Factor can help you up. You're going to meet your wellness goals in time for summer. Thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and even Keto, Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart your new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you've always got new flavors to explore. Crush your wellness goals with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. Make your day delicious. From breakfast to dessert, you can stay fueled with easy and nutritious options. By the way, I want to mention you'd be treating yourself because we're talking restaurant-quality meals here from Factor. Things that feature premium ingredients. I know what you're thinking. How premium? Well, how's some filet mignon sound? What about some shrimp or blackened salmon? It's all here at Factor. They're even going to help you keep your kitchen time to a minimum. You don't have to worry about shopping. You don't have to worry about prepping. You don't have to worry about cooking. You don't even have to worry about cleaning up. This is an effortless way to support some better lifestyle choices. You can choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage your calories, maximize your protein intake, avoid meat, or just eat well balanced. Head right now to factormeals.com/myworld50 and use our code myworld50. You'll get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code myworld50 at factormeals.com/myworld50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. That's factormeals.com/myworld50. So Jeff, let's talk.
Can I give you a little testimonial that I haven't shared? Because it's been a bit, I feel like, since you've done a Factor read, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, there is one of my homies in the gym who is literally, he fixes his own breakfast and stuff like that, but he's works a lot of hours at his finance job. But he has gone. He listens to the pod. Promo code MyWorld50. So if you're single or whatever it may be, but if you're out there and need good nutrition, Conrad, he eats a Factor meal for lunch. He eats it for dinner 7 days a week, straight off the pod. So yeah, in our house, it's a go-to. I've got a 21-year-old in the house, a 20-year-old, Cody 17, me and Karen. We now have upped our order. People on the street or have gone by, and the guy across the street. Anyway, it's a go-to, brother. It is that is another great benefit of doing this podcast, being turned on to Factor. But yeah, a guy eats a week, whatever it is, 14 meals a week a Factor. So get it, Con.
Much more affordable than you might imagine. If you've noticed your food costs are going up, whether you're hitting the drive-through or using a delivery app or you're just trying to cook at home, man, there's no way to escape it. Well, here's a little pro tip. Not only is Factor cheaper than what I was doing, and it's better for me, it's also faster and easier. That's a win, 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 win. I'm out of wins. You need to go check it out. Look for yourself right now. I'm telling you, it's unlike any food or meal delivery service we've ever used. I mentioned it. Filet mignon, shrimp. You don't normally hear about those. Factormeals.com/myworld50. That's factormeals.com/myworld50. It tastes great. It's the real deal, and you're going to love it. Factormeals.com/myworld50. Be sure to use our promo code myworld50. You'll be glad you did. So, man, 1987, let's jump into it. What a crazy year it is. You know, I guess we should start off, at the beginning of the year. I should mention we're going to be using a little bit of Torch. We're going to be using a little bit of the Observer as we break down a really crazy year. Now, you're still relatively new to the wrestling scene. Of course, you grew up in the business, but how long do you think, we'll call it January of 87, you've actually been active in the ring in front of fans?
Conrad, this is what is, and as time goes on, April of 86 is when I had my first match.
Right.
And I was at the very, March Madness. I was at the tail end of basketball season. So my plan was, I thought in 87 I would be playing my sophomore year of basketball. And, like you said, growing up in it, I hear the stories when my old man sent a bunch of talent to Watts and, Crockett and Flair in and out and just the different territories. And I referenced a couple of weeks ago, going back to my dad's bedroom when he had the big C-band when I was, 12, 13, 14 years old, watching the old Madison Square Garden shows and all that, always being a wrestling junkie. But in 1987, just how little I really was aware of what a monumental year it was in the entire business. I was this guy that was getting an opportunity at Memphis TV and working 7 days a week. And, just kind of getting that grind and, just all the things going on. But being in the wrestling office, because my dad would say, hey, you just need to come up, get you, sit in the office, sit over there. We'll have a little bit of booking meetings. I want you to understand the finance part of it and the town settlement. I was getting my college education in the wrestling industry and hearing these different phone calls and hearing the feedback. And I used to, this is another thought, Conrad, that when I had reading this research, I can remember, because we had the office phone, it was kind of behind my dad's desk. But if he was outside or going across the house or getting more tobacco, if he wasn't right by the phone, he wanted me to answer the phone. And from time to time, I'd pick it up and I think it was Jarrett Enterprises, how we answered the phone. And if it was Lawler, he would mess with me or whatever it may be. But I knew when he was going to be talking to Lawler, I'm like, okay, I better go get me 3 or 4 magazines. This is going to be a long call. I'm just trying to think others that, different wrestlers and all this. So that's how this was really supposed to be my sophomore year in college. Well, this was kind of a mashup of my true in 1987 introductory to the business side of things. Because in 86, it was blowing and going and first match and just trying to get my feet under me. When I 87 and I don't say got a rhythm, but a little bit, he's like, hey man, I want you to start coming around the office. And so that's what we did. I certainly did Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and some Thursdays every week. And we'd get in from Memphis 2 or 3 in the morning. He wanted me at the office at 10 and to have already worked out. So anyway, Conrad, I say all that to say, I love reading the research. I hope this podcast has, I'm going to be very honest. I hope it has lots of downloads because these kind of podcasts to me are fascinating that we're going to talk about all these different things. And I'll give you my spin on where I was at mentally, what I was thinking about, the feedback I heard, the conversations that I heard. But 87, I'm not sure. And as far as a transitional year, this is the year of the business really, really transitioning from the end of the territories.
Yes.
Period. The radical change in the business is 1987.
To put into context what 1987 is going to hold later in the year, WrestleMania III is going to be a bonanza. And that's going to happen in late March and early April of the year. But this is right smack dab in the middle of Vince trying to expand and go national. We know about all the success that he had with Rock and Wrestling and MTV and the War to Settle the Score and the original WrestleMania. Maybe he, as Jeff would say, got out over his skis a little bit in WrestleMania 2. What's better than one big city WrestleMania? What if there were 3? One in New York and one in Chicago and one in California. Well, now we're back to the basics and we're going to run a super show. Now we know that Dusty Rhodes has ran super shows before with Starrcade and he was using a lot of closed circuit. But Vince McMahon is about to become not only the king of pay-per-view, but the king of arena business. And it's happening in real time in 1987. And I know when you go back and you think about young Jeff Jarrett in January of 87, he's 8 or 9 months into his in-ring career. He's got the blinders on and just focusing on getting better. You're not really concerning yourself with responsibilities that would have landed on the shoulders of your father about running the territory and things like that. But now I wonder, with the benefit of hindsight, because when I talked to David Crockett and certainly his brother Jim before he passed, they both agreed that 1986 was like the high watermark, the most success they had had in their territory. And now 87 is when a lot of territories are challenged. We know that later this same year, on the heels of WrestleMania III, Watts is just going to cash out and he's going to sell his promotion and territory, what's left of it, to Jim Crockett. When you think back about your dad and Lawler and Memphis in January of 87, do you think they felt like, hey, we're riding high from 86? We got to pull the nose up on this thing? Do they think they're insulated from McMahon's national expansion the way other territories weren't as much? Or if you had to sort of put yourself in your dad's shoes with the benefit of hindsight, how do you felt he felt about his territory business in January 87? Was he bullish?
We talked off and on through the years a lot about this. To give you a little, okay, where did I start on this? But yeah, to say bullish, and he knew the fight that he was in. I think he candidly thought, and it depends on what year. He's got a lot of, I get my delusional optimism probably from him in a lot of ways, but he really, really looked at, and in 86, business obviously was starting to go down, but here's what he kind of would always kind of land back on in those years. You didn't have overnight ratings. You didn't get the ratings from Saturday morning TV on Monday. They used to call it the book, a book of ratings, which would come out twice a year. And I know there's different things, but they took a May book and they took a November sweeps month, and then it evolved. But ratings books were kind of on monthly average, or they took them individually, but they would just give you a boatload of data. But I say all this to say Memphis ratings in 87 were still astronomically high. Wave TV in Louisville, great. Evansville, really good. I'll get into the kind of the Nashville ratings, because we went from a U station to the ABC affiliate. Anyway, ratings were still really good. Lawler was still rocking and rolling. The talent, if you will, and I'm a young kid listening, was still good. He just knew that, okay, we're going to fight Vince when he comes in once a year or twice a year or maybe 3 times a year. We just got to be prepared for that. But yes, he was absolutely bullish on it, and kind of, I don't want to get too far ahead, but each individual territory, I can remember him saying through phone calls of real time in 87, but also, years later in, I don't know, early 90s in conversations, or even late 80s after this, or early 90s. And he would just see how this happened, see that happen. Because as we're going to touch on, 87, January of 87 and January of 88, the industry that my father knew had radically changed. I mean, radically changed. So real-time conversation, real-time feedback that I got to hear. And then as the years went on, hearing all that, and the partnership between Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett, I got to understand, didn't realize it at the time, but I really got to understand it so much more in 87. I knew they were business partners in 86, and I knew they were in 85. And, the golden age, or the golden age of the territories, 80 through to 85, 86, was, everybody was making money. But 87, my dad was definitely to the long way around. And I know I got granular there. 87, he was still bullish.
Well, you had to be bullish if you were at all getting handed sheets from the Observer, because on the Observer that comes out on January 19th, there's reader pages, just like there would be in a newspaper back then, where subscribers would write in and tell Dave what they were thinking and what they saw and what their opinions were. You got to remember, folks, this is the late 80s. It's not like you could send Dave a text or you could send him a tweet. And back then, nobody wanted to call long distance. So you put a damn stamp in the mail and you send it off and you hope you got a response. Well, we got rewritten here in the Observer.
It's just crazy.
John from McKeesport, Pennsylvania, wrote to Dave and said, after seeing my first Championship Wrestling Association show in Memphis on December 28th, I believe there is someone there better than Jerry Bryant. Bryant is good, but he's only about 5'9" or 5'10". The real rising star of the promotion is Jeff Jarrett. He reminds me of Sam Houston a year and a half ago in the way he takes bumps. This promotion should do okay with Jarrett on top when Lawler retires. I would recommend Memphis as a great place to vacation and see. There are a lot of interesting things to do there besides seeing the wrestling. Now, I know that we've talked about, the way the dirt sheets were perceived once upon a time back in the day. But does a positive note like this, do you even find out about this, or did you just hear about this for the first time during our research?
Well, it was the Joel Good. It's the trips of fans that would come down from the Northeast. And if you had, if Conrad, if you were to ask me, and you're not, but I'm just saying, hey, Jeff, what's your earliest memories of those folks that took bus trips? My absolute first memory would be my grandmother coming to me and saying, come here, kind of sternly. And she'd say, now we have a group of fans that are coming down here. And she would kind of give me the speech on, how to treat them. Look, these are diehard fans and da 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 da. She was so appreciative of a busload of fans coming. That that was my first introduction. And no, I wouldn't have ever heard of this at the time or one of those deals. But no, it was pretty cool to me, because that was, look, we take everything for granted now because X and Instagram, and it's all age of instantaneous information. But, folks come down, and my grandmother's giving them the red carpet, and they've all got ringside seats, and we're going to talk to them, and we're going to do, hey, Jeff, will you sign a few autographs for these folks? It was really a pretty cool treat. And this is when I read the research, and this is one of the readers, I was just like, wow, way, way back. How the business has evolved. I'll just say that.
Let me ask you, we haven't spent any time talking about him, but I love that John gave a shout out here to Jerry Bryant. What can you tell us about Jerry Bryant?
So Jerry, from Memphis, tragically, he passed away of ALS. But he was a good buddy. Well, I don't say good buddy, but he broke in the Memphis area and was a bump taken. Later in his career, he teamed with Big Lou Winston, and they were, I'll say this diplomatically, so they were at the very tip top of that. I don't want to call them enhancement guys, but they were Memphis TV and just worked the Memphis territory because Jerry didn't work territories, did never leave Memphis, but he was, and this will kind of imagine this, a professional wrestler being an incredible car guy. He, car salesman, general manager. I mean, he ended up running multiple dealerships, I believe, but I mean, he was in the car business and really, really successful. And then I don't know if they were originally buddies or became buddies, but him and Lawler were tight, and a Memphis guy, but he just had a easy knack. He's, as far as in-ring work, Conrad, I mean, I can remember as a kid, as a rookie or first couple of years, me getting in the ring with him, he would teach me so much and talk me through matches and was really good to me. And again, a bump taking heel, like no other. He was really good.
Sadly passed away in December of '89 from Lou Gehrig's disease is what we used to call it back then.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about where we are with territories. We mentioned at the top of the show that things are kind of bleak in some of the territories. Now, we know that things have been doing really well from a rating standpoint. You just ran through all of that for Memphis, but boy, Bill Watts, by January, he sees the writing on the wall. Jim Duggan and the Fantastics are both going to be relieved of their contracts. We know Duggan really wants to go work for Vince McMahon. There's a whole host of talent who are going to wind up there. Ted DiBiase and Kurt Hennig and well, the stars are about to get even more loaded up, as you could imagine, in that roster. But you're down in Memphis. So I'm curious, from your perspective, was your dad as concerned about losing some of the key talent as some other territories were? I ask because your dad was at least crazy like a fox, smart enough to know, hey, if my top star is Jerry Lawler and I make him my partner, we're equally yoked, to use a biblical term. He's not going to just hit the hills. He's in this with me. I'm not going to be sort of SOL. Was that your dad's approach, or was there more to it than that? We needed Lawler and these five guys or what have you.
Lawler was the obvious centerpiece.
Yes.
My dad had a true, and I know there's an evolution of psychology in the industry, but I think you can kind of look back on not just my old man, but Vince McMahon, different territory promoters. They wanted their guy, and I say this with all due diplomacy because I've been and others for my career. Lawler and others. And he really had a mindset. Now, would he ever share that with Bill Dundee, the number 2, or Dutch Mantel, or, other number 2, 3, 4? My dad was a big believer in the nucleus of your crew, but you can have 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6. And if you don't have one, it is a devastating blow. He truly believed in that kind of psychology, if you will. And I've heard multiple conversations. I remember, he was very complimentary when Vince, and I know I'm jumping around here, but Hogan was the guy. Hulkamania running wild, and then all of a sudden, my dad, we're hearing this conversation. Oh man, they're running 2 towns a night. He's like, well, who's the main event over there? Warrior got hot, or Savage, so they're running. So it wasn't with the lead horse, if you will, but that was his psychology. He believed in that. He believed in protecting your TV it is everything. your television relationship, and I'm not saying yes, no cussing or blood or rules or whatever it is, but he believed in that relationship in every general manager in Memphis, Louisville, Evans, whatever it may be. He believed in that one-on-one relationship with the television network. And he believed in the top guy mentality, have a real laser focus, not just internally, but externally. Your promotion is branded by that lead horse in so many ways. That was his mindset. And so when he would hear conversations, you referenced Jim Duggan and Jim, so many people, Conrad, that are probably listening to this podcast only know Jim as kind of the, I mean, it's so he got that over. Prior to that, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and I'm emphasizing Hacksaw in the Watts territory, was this brawler,
badass.
Badass. I mean, zero comedy in him. I mean, zero. And so because we're on topic here, my old man hearing little nuggets of, wait, Duggan's leaving? Well, yeah. Well, they got Steve Williams and my dad. Well, that's great, but he ain't Hacksaw. And Bill Watts was a color, on his own territory. Bill was a commentator that would come out of retirement every now and then, but he told his stories. But really, the way Bill looked at it, and I'm paraphrasing and I'm taking kind of what my old man is, that Bill looked at Duggan as his guy, but I don't say Duggan was a clone, but they were very similar in their kick-ass beliefs. Top babyface who kicked ass. Oh, Jerry Lawler. Top babyface who kicked ass. And you could go all the way down the territory line. A single top babyface star.
Really one of the, we didn't use this term back then, but Duggan was one of the pillars of the UWF.
Yes.
Along with Dr. Death, along with what would eventually be Big Bubba, along with Terry Taylor, along with Ted DiBiase, along certainly with Junkyard Dog. Maybe he was the crown jewel, but we're trying to get Duggan to help us build the one-man gang on the way out. So one-man gang is going to be sticking around at least for a little while longer. And Duggan is actually going to finish up at the end of January. And just 3 weeks later, fun little trivia note, Hacksaw Jim Duggan's first match in the WWF is at the Baltimore Arena against Sika, Roman Reigns' father, who just passed away a couple of months ago.
Wow.
What a small world it is. But when you start to hear, when your dad hears, wait, Duggan's one of the top guys and he's leaving, does your dad think that might be a cautionary tale that, hey, maybe that could happen to us? Or again, does he think, man, I got Lawler, I'm not going to have any of those issues?
He absolutely, my earliest memories of this kind of mindset was, it's a dollars and cents thing. And he knew that, we'll call it the total gross of Memphis, Louisville, Evansville, just by the size of the market, the economies in each town. We weren't going to draw $100,000 in Memphis. Whereas maybe a Houston or Dallas or a New Orleans, a bigger market, they may do those. He knew his limitations. And had no problem talking to me, I'm trying to, or talent, or anybody about that, knowing we're going to work on a limited budget. He was never like, hey, I'm going to pay my guys just to keep them. He never was going to do that role. What he always was, and I would hear these on the phone calls, and again, I don't want to jump too far ahead of this, but the Vern Gagne conversations. Is there something where we can, because I remember him saying, hey, maybe we can figure out something with you, maybe go to Japan once a year, that you could make some good money. I mean, that's probably not a good reference. He knew his limitations and knew that I got to keep my nucleus. I think not to be repetitive, but that was his mindset. Duggan leaving, and we're going to get into multiple others that are leaving. Oh boy, what kind of gimmicks Vince going to put on him now? It was the cartoon era that was looked down upon I shouldn't say doubted upon, but
they were. The people looked down their nose at it. They thought it wasn't real wrestling. It's
here it goes. Yeah. Hey, what kind of character are they going to make him up there? And again, he leaned into, even back in those days, we're professional wrestling. Let them go be showbiz, I think was a lot of times how it was referred to.
Let's talk about some creative because, JR always says it comes down to cash and creative. And allegedly, Bill Watts was no longer able to meet these guarantees that he had made to guys. So Duggan is looking for a way out to go join some of his pals who are seemingly making boatloads of cash. This is around the same time period where we started hearing guys like the Iron Sheik making, 6 figures on an action figure. And I think a lot of guys heard that and thought, well, I'm going to go because they'll do that for me. The reality is every kid wanted the Hulk Hogan doll, and Hulk Hogan's doll had to beat up another doll. So they needed a bad guy. But I think people heard that and man, it became telephone, telegram, telewrestler. I got to go get 6 figures for an action figure. So everybody wants to go work for Vince. Now, did everybody have that experience? Probably not. 2 other guys who do not have that experience are the Fantastics. And we know that they're going to be leaving Watts around the same time. But I think they're going to find out the hard way. Boy, the landscape is not as welcoming for everybody in the WWF. And I want to talk about what you're doing in Memphis with one of your top stars. In that very early in the year, we do an angle with Jerry Lawler where Austin Idol and Tommy Rich post him groin first around the ring post, and he does a stretcher job. Now, the question here, Jeff, is, because I don't think this has ever been clarified, I'm curious if you recall, was Lawler on the shelf for a vasectomy, and this was a way to explain him having the injury? Because whenever you're without your top star, it does feel like, boy, that's going to be hurting business. Talk to me about this perceived. Was it real? Was it not? I mean, I know that sometimes, I don't believe it was a real injury, but in terms of
the injury angle,
is this a cover for that? Yeah.
Okay. And I guess enough time has gone on. Jerry, please forgive me if I'm sharing.
well, hang on. Let's put it in context here. Lance Russell, this is bleeped out, but this airs on Memphis television. They actually report, Lance does, that Lawler has a ruptured testicle as a result of this.
Buddy, when I tell you, go ahead.
Well, I know, I'm just saying, like, if you're really trying, because that feels so like, could we have heard that in 97? For sure. But to hear that in 87 is like, wait, what?
Okay. 86, Lawler lost to lose or leave town. Business goes to hell, as they all could have predicted. It was Hulkamania running wild. We need our Lawler. Let's come back with the angle. They go for my dad's eye, beat up his son. Lawler comes back, sell out. They ran that. We'll kind of we'll be polite and say they ran with that angle 3 or 4 months in a row. All right, Lawler's living life on his terms, and just life goes along, and he's married at the time, and the business was up and down, and Tommy Rich was in the territory. Austin Idol was in the territory. They had unbelievable chemistry. A young man by the name of Paul E. Dangerously, also known as Paul Heyman, was in the territory. So business was up and down, and we've kind of referenced some of the houses, but they needed to do they decided to do an angle because Lawler was going to take care, I'll say this, of some personal business, Connie, and get a reversal of a vasectomy.
Got it.
So that was the whole, okay, let's do this. And of course, Lawler being not just the team player and the artiste, but man, we're going to go all the way with this and make it make sense and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. And that's the night that Eddie Marlin, Memphis Coliseum, they, at 3 p.m, there's maybe a few people there, but anyway, they snuck Tommy Rich in, and Tommy Rich hides under the ring from 3 p.m. Couple of orders, continual orders. He started with a 6-pack of tall boys, and I think my grandfather Eddie Marlin had to make a couple of more runs and had a bucket under there so he could take care of business. But the main event was Idol against Lawler, and they had this cage match, and The cage didn't set up on the apron. It set around the ring, kind of blood and gut style. And Tommy Rich rolled out from under it at the right time. And they had built this big cage match, I think hair versus hair. If Lawler won, he was going to give everybody their money back because of some mindset that he's going to kick Idol. So people were going to get to see an Idol head shaving and their money back. And they get down to the end of the match. That freaking Tommy Rich rolls out and beat the hell out of him. And match was over, and they reverse posted him, and Lawler sold it like no tomorrow. And he went off and had surgery legitimately on his testicle.
Well, there you go. I mean, just
what an angle, dude.
The idea that you're saying that word on television in 87 is a big deal.
In the intensity of that angle, talking about 1987, the first time, I don't know. There may be something in the archives but Conrad, hearing the people in the arena, again, I am so blessed at this stage that I can kind of reference. If it's a hearing, it's a sound. The old timers, sometimes people call it quiet heat, but it's like, you son of a bitch. It was called the whole arena was caught off guard because it's a cage match, and you didn't in those days expect a guy's going to come from under the cage, and the lights never went out that night. There was, nowadays there's production and we're so exposed to everything. But in that time, the people came into the arena at 5:30, doors open. I'll just say something, 5:30, 6, lights never darkened for anything. I mean, nobody thought about sneaking in, and damn it, if they didn't pull one over it, and Tommy Rich was under there, and just him and Idol were so different. The universal heartthrob, Idol, and polished, and just an arrogant heel. And Tommy was a rough ass redneck in a lot of ways. Man, they had great chemistry, and throw Paul Lee as a young one guy in there. It clicked, and the people were livid. It's good stuff, man. Really good stuff.
On the way to WrestleMania 3, we're getting updates in the Observer about how tickets are selling. And it's noted in early March that they've sold 40,000 tickets, but Dave is not so sure. He says, even though there's still 5 weeks left, it's going to be very difficult to actually sell 50,000 more seats, as all the good seats are gone. Most of the diehard fans already have them. Those who are flying in have probably already made reservations. So now you're just looking at fringe folks. I don't know about 50,000 more of them. But he also says, hey, the pay-per-view's been blocked out in both Michigan and Ontario. And we've heard of this before. We don't want you to be able to stay home and order the thing. We want you to come out and support the live event. And we know, man, they're going to continue to cruise. I mean, just a week later or a few weeks later, there's a report that they've sold more than 70,000 tickets. So they've already broken the record that they set with Hulk Hogan and Paul Orndorff in Toronto back in August of the prior year. So there's a suggestion that, hey, there might be a $2 million gate here. And at this time, there's 166 closed circuit locations. And I know some of you are young enough to say, what the hell does that mean? Well, it means you'd go down to your local arena, or perhaps a movie theater or a drive-in stadium theater or something like that. And you would be able to pay a ticket price that maybe is higher than a traditional movie, and then go in and watch this thing. Because not everybody had pay-per-view capabilities at their household. But about 6 million homes did have pay-per-view here. I'm bringing all of this up, Jeff, because your dad was such an innovator. He owns his own territory, but he sees these things that are happening in his business that maybe he never thought were possible. The big closed circuit on 166 screens, pay-per-view capacity to 6 million homes. And now we see that Vince, even the critics were saying, well, he sold 40,000, but can he sell 50? Well, he sold 70,000, but will they do 2 million? When your dad is processing all of this, did your dad at any point feel like he needed to try to keep up and compete? Because I know these reports put a lot of pressure on Jim Crockett and his brother David. Was your dad feeling any sort of similar pressure, seeing all the meteoric success of the WWF?
So let's go back, and you might appreciate this. I certainly, again, I love kind of generality, the topic. We're doing deep dives here and there, but you got to almost take it back to 1987. My dad was born in 42, so he started his really wrestling journey late 60s, early 70s, and all that. But Conrad, in the first, and this is just obviously my experience with him and hearing it, but his first kind of mindset, and you'll probably be able to give stats is that, holy crap, in the Sheik's territory, they're going to sell 70,000 tickets. It wasn't, and I'll get to the pay-per-view and closed circuit in a second, but the mindset of Vince is outside of his territory. The McMahon family runs New York, and now they're over in Detroit at the Lions Stadium, if you will, and the Sheik's quote unquote old territory, and they're doing this with this, and as the Observer reported about, the Toronto, that was Maple Leaf and the big monster business Hogan and Orndorff did. And just, my dad was much more geared, and this is a character flaw, or it is, he was looking at that live event business so much. Again, going back to kind of the core, that was what his mindset was, that, holy, look at what the live event business is doing. And then you start putting in, my dad always, I don't think he ever missed a Mike Tyson fight. Hagler Hearns, the Hagler Hearns, and oh my gosh, who's the third of that boxing trilogy during the 80s? Hagler, Hearns, and who was Sugar Ray Leonard? Leonard, Hagler, Hearns, and then, anyway, my dad never missed boxing, ever. He always bought those pay-per-views, but the closed circuit, he understood it from kind of the mentality. And so as far as real data bringing in and all that, he was obviously amazed at that, but he always stayed focused on the live event. And okay, how are they doing this? And what TV did they have? Conrad, in 87, so USA Network was where? I'm just trying to think, because those are the conversations on how are they putting the butts in seats? What's their TV? Just all that, all those kind of mindsets, but it was geared to my recollection and my experience with him. He was amazed and dialed into, they're selling 70,000 tickets in Sheik's territory. How the hell are they doing that? With what TV and what marketing? Yes, action figures, and yes, Hulkamania was running wild and all that kind of stuff. But that was the big box office number that he would lean into. And then the pay-per-view business was even bigger, obviously, and even more revenue. Again, 87, the transitional year that it was across the board. Territories dying and pay-per-view exploding.
It's hard to take a look at where Memphis was and think it was dying, though. I mean, in this era, you're doing 7,000 or 8,000 folks a week at the Mid-South Coliseum. That's like a $40,000 gate, even with very affordable tickets. But I'm wondering, with this emergence of new media, like once upon a time, man, you probably at least rode in cars that had 8-track players, and then eventually it would be cassettes and then CDs. And now people are like, what the hell's a CD? Like, it's all evolved. And I'm wondering, does your dad see, hey, this used to just be about tickets and picture money, but now with the licensing of the action figures and closed circuit and pay-per-view and VHS, is this a newfound opportunity? And we know that there would be, the WWF's going to make a mint with their home video releases, but there were sporadic, I don't know, your dad felt like he put his toe in the water a few times. He'd do some things with Pro Wrestling Illustrated and release some matches that way. Was your dad, when I talked to Jim Crockett Jr. years ago, when I had a conversation with him about what the difference was and the reason Vince took off and maybe JCP did not in the same manner, he was pretty clear in saying he should have hired more support staff. He just didn't have the support staff there to keep up with these things. You know, he knew how to promote wrestling, but we needed someone to run home video. We needed someone to run merchandise, all these different revenue arms that are really spinning up out of nowhere, that now there's a newfound opportunity. I mean, because by this point, Vince is on well over 100 syndicated stations. So it's not just USA, but he's also got the syndicated show. And this is not the era where guys are getting rights fees. So when you were rattling off, hey, the ratings are great in Evansville and they're great in Memphis and they're strong in Nashville, you could promote things to sell that way. Do you think that if there was a missed opportunity for Memphis, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe your dad needed more, for lack of a better word, we'll call it infrastructure from an office standpoint to capitalize on some of these things?
So the short answer is not only yes, but hell yes. He had a mentality, for better or worse, that the wrestling industry is, what's a wrestling promoter? And we're going to get into a Ron Fuller story later, that he's selling half his territory to Dave Woods. And, but Nat had a real fundamental belief that it's relationships and what's between your ears on how to really navigate a promotional business. So much so that, and this is one of the things that you look at the reality of it is, so Burns Library sold to Vince, World Class Library sold, all the different libraries of film were sold to basically really was the nucleus of the WWE network, if you will. My old man and Lawler, their mindset was so laser focused on this is whether behind the times or narrow sighted or just lack of vision. And that's where I go down at the end of the day, maybe 2 generations from now. I think what is going to look back on with the chairman, with Vince, is his vision of things were just completely different, because my old man took a master copy of Memphis TV on a Saturday morning and probably had, 3 or 4 masters. They recorded over the masters. There is no such thing as a quote unquote original Memphis tape library. Now there's a lot of tape traders and there's a lot of content that floats around and all that. But as far as like the original, and I get it wrong, but whether it's 3/4 inch to VHS, anyway, the quality of it as it's morphed through the years, that doesn't exist. Conrad, that tells me everything as far as the mindset. And when I got to the WWF in 93 and they dive into this Coliseum home video, and here's why you want to get on it, Jeff. And yeah, you may have to stick around till midnight, till the 3rd hour of challenge is done or whatever it is, but you're going to get residuals. You're going to get Coliseum home video, royalty checks and all that kind of stuff is. And so whether it's Crockett or Fritz or whatever territory owner, that transition from a live event business to a television business was missed by, in a lot of ways, Vince, by all of them, except Vince. That's the transition. I'm going from a live event business to a television business. And so to have a television business, you got to have a different marketing department. You got to have like you said, a home video department, affiliate relations, which goes in all the syndication. It's just a whole you got to have pay-per-view relations. Then all of a sudden we're going to get international. All of that, the departments were put in place, and the territory promoters, they missed all of that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's the business radically changed in 87. We're seeing the territories go down. If you drill it down, the live event business, for the lack of a better word, what became secondary. And a guy who made so much money in the 70s only on live event business, they didn't see the change coming, didn't adapt.
As someone who was not too terribly far from the Mid-South territory, we've heard Bill Watts say pretty consistently that the reason the UWF and his territory collapsed the way it did, one of the biggest contributing factors, amongst other things, but the biggest perhaps, was the oil crash. And we've heard that story told a million different ways, but the gist was the area was just going through a rough patch. Now, whenever I would bring up something like that to Bruce, he would always say, they just didn't want to see it. That's all it is. The idea being everyone has, for lack of a better word, an excuse. Oh, they just opened the so-and-so. Oh, nobody ever does that during this time of year. And, Bruce would always joke, oh, they opened the new gas station. Literally any sort of excuse for a promoter to point to. When your dad hears that, hey, Watts is in trouble and he's selling the territory, does your dad think, hey, this oil thing's an excuse and he's just burnt out? Where do you think your dad landed on that?
Where do I think he landed on that? As you were saying all that, the three magical words that are a part of radically changing my life over the last 7 years are rationalization, justification, or minimalization. My brain can do that with anything as opposed to looking inward and saying, hey, Jeff, how did you screw this up again royally? I think at the end of the day, old man would look at Watts and essentially go, well, your relationships weren't intact and Duggan wanted to leave and this guy wanted to leave and that guy wanted to leave. But at the end of the day, if you can't create compelling content with emotional attachment and create personal issues that draw money, that's on you. That's probably, if I had to hear the phone call between him and Lawler, he wouldn't have bought into the oil economy. Oh, yeah, that contributes a little bit. But my dad was just a stickler to, hey, at the end of the day, you got to create compelling content. Period. End of story.
Let's talk about WrestleMania here for a moment. I know that, we've talked to Bruce before, and he said that sometimes when WCW would run a pay-per-view, Howard Finkel would host like watch-along pay-per-view parties. So he'd get the pay-per-view and he'd grill some steak burgers, which is a funny way that Bruce always says steak burgers. Did that exist with your dad? Like, I know your dad is strictly business, just the facts, ma'am. I get it. But is he watching a big show like WrestleMania, do you think? Does he get a VHS of it later? Do you watch with him? Are any guys getting together? What can you tell us about that?
That's a great question. As far as I can remember watching. So 85 was the Garden, correct?
85 is the first WrestleMania. Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw that after the fact on obviously I guess a VHS. 86 was the three different locations. I saw that in VHS form. I want to say 87 was the first pay-per-view that I saw live. Maybe as far as I don't think I watched 85 or 86. No. I don't know what that answer would be. My gut tells me, hell, son, I ain't going to contribute to their profits. But I may be off. I don't recall him. Well, I don't recall any stories about him watching it.
I've seen some people, Jeff, who would say, well, I don't want to read what anyone else wrote because I don't want to be influenced by them. And I've heard other comedians say something like that before. But most of the comedians I know, they watch everybody's stuff.
Yes.
And most professional wrestlers I know, they watch everybody's stuff. But a guy like Tony Schiavone would sit here and honestly tell you, nope, never watched it. Wasn't us, didn't care. But I wonder from your perspective as the decision maker, shouldn't you be watching what everyone does? I mean, why wouldn't you want to learn from their mistakes, learn from their successes? Like Jack Welch, who built a heck of a company named GE, would often say, hey man, imitation's where it's at. Don't worry about innovating. Just imitate the best practices of all these other successful companies and you'll be successful. And I'm curious from your standpoint as a creative type and a business type, because that's what we're talking about, the wrestling business. So from a business standpoint, yeah, we want to see what they're doing and what works and what doesn't work. But I do get creatively, maybe I don't want to be influenced and be labeled a joke stealer in a comedy world. Where do you land on that? You watched everything all the time. Did your dad?
No, and I'm sitting here thinking, trying to go back in time and all that. And I learned this over time. And you know what? There is a lot of situations, even as it sits here today. I mean, that the in the WWE, obviously in our business, they've seen things other places, and they've just done it a little bit different, and maybe ends up doing it better. The more coverage over time. I'm a huge believer in whether it's creative, Conrad, angles, talent, anything that relates to, we'll call it production, talent, marketing, creative, all that. Watch it all, absorb it all, because you can't ever. I mean, you can in a sense go duplicate it, but you're going to make it your own. So it's going to be a different talent or a different whatever it is. So I'm a big believer in that. My dad, when I would hear him talk, that, and again, I think he was obviously probably frustrated and wouldn't let on too much, just the way the industry was going and his territory down, and just. He's in those phone calls, whether it's Florida or Watts or Texas or whatever, and territories down. He knew the business obviously was going down, but dealing with talent, dealing with the boys, I know that fatigued him. And I've tried to work on myself on this, the character flaws. Old man would have expectations of others. Now, he didn't say it in these exact words, but I've heard it enough through my entire career. He had expectations of others that I wouldn't say it, but I would think it. Dad, nobody's going to work as hard at this as you are. That's silly to even think of. And he would actually think that guys, I think his expectations were so off base, which kind of soured him on things, which kind of made him go, nope, I'm not watching. I have no interest in watching. I don't know. That's kind of where I sit today. And Conrad, in a lot of ways, I'm just taking a whole mash of all my experiences, but a little bit of educated guess, if you will.
Well, let's try to guess about WrestleMania 3. We know that this is going to be a spectacle. It's going to set the WWF's arena business on fire. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes, but the actual show itself, do you remember when and how and where you watched this the first time?
Yes, I was dating my first wife, and she didn't really have a lot of interest in it, but I watched it.
Did you go to a theater or did you order it at home?
Home.
Okay.
Paid my future father-in-law cash for it. And yeah, watched every minute of it. I don't want to, I'll let you. Yes, watched every minute of it. I don't want to get to, if we're going to get into the talk of the show.
We are. Because listen, everybody and their brother knows what the main event was that night. Everybody and their brother knows what sold the majority of those tickets. It was the fabulous Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant story. Now we're going to have to recreate a little bit of history. Nobody's ever slammed Andre. This is the first time these guys have faced. Whatever people are led to believe, none of that really matters. We sold tickets. We made a bunch of money. That's what they came for. But when it was over with, Michael Hayes has said that he felt like WrestleMania 3 is when the tide turned, and it sent a message to the rest of the territories about how challenging it was going to be to compete with this. Because now it didn't just feel like, quote unquote, cartoon wrestling, as you had sort of said earlier. Hey, what character are they going to put on him? We do real wrestling. They do that showbiz stuff. But right in the middle of this match or this pay-per-view is one of the best matches of all time with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat and the Macho Man Randy Savage. And so guys like Al Snow have, in interviews for decades since, said, hey, what was the best match on the show? And almost everyone says this match, Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat. However, Al Snow digs his heels in and says, nope, it was Hulk Hogan and Andre, because that's what people paid to see. And so this sort of breaks down even to modern wrestling. Like the criticism of SummerSlam was, well, they had good stories, but the matches weren't what they could have been. So to make a more modern comparison, maybe Savage Steamboat was more work rate, like maybe an AEW show, And maybe Hogan Andre was more story, like the Bloodline. You had both on this card. When that show was over, I know what a big fan of Randy Savage you are. But what did you feel like would have a bigger impact on the business? Because Michael Hayes had said this show proved they can do what we do just as well or better with a hard-hitting, badass in-ring performance like what we saw with Steamboat and Savage. But they've also got the kids and the story and the showbiz with Hogan and Andre. Did you feel similarly as a young buck in the wrestling business? What'd you think?
Because on the research, and can you read, and I'm not picking on Dave here, but his comment after he watched the show in regards to the main event, or I think there's in generalizations, what he said, and I'll follow that up. I don't know if you have that.
I'm not really sure what you're alluding to, so hit me with it.
He says something to, he was soured on the main event.
Oh yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but he gave it negative star ratings. He said something like negative 10,000 stars or something. I mean, that's when people first learned, he represents the voice of a small audience.
Well, and I don't want to, context is king. So I didn't know what size audience I don't know what his audience is today or then all this, but
he's much bigger now. I mean, we talked about how you had to communicate back then. We couldn't just pull up his Twitter feed or get on his paywall. None of that existed. You had to go at my house in Gunnersville, Alabama. I had to go check the doggone mailbox on a Monday and hope it made it all the way from California. And we'd be reading about things that at that time happened weeks ago or maybe a month. Yeah. So it's just a whole new world.
But reason I'm saying that is just, and maybe reading that, because when I watched it, Conrad, and I'm in the middle of working with Pat Tanaka and Billy Travis and coming off working with Akio Sato and watching Lawler and Rich and Idol and all this, Conrad, down to King Kong Bundy or Hillbilly Jim or not the golf cart, the whatever they drove back and forth to the ring, and Heenan, from top to bottom, watching that show, I can say that it had affected me that, okay, this is exactly what professional wrestling is. It is a spectacle. And I loved at the time, I loved the Hogan Andre match for completely different reasons that I love Steamboat Savage. And I like the showbiz part of it. And again, hearing the Jarrett, Jerry Lawler learning tree, hey, you've got to have a little bit of everything, because if you have the same exact matches 6 in a row or 7 in a row or 8 in a row, it's a boring show because they've already seen exactly, by the 8th match, what you gave them in the first match. So the diversity of it. And when I watched that, I said, okay, it clicks. This was as diverse as you possibly could, with the singers and the national anthem and the America the Beautiful or whatever they put on, and just the whole spectacle of it all. And me absolutely knowing full well, I've watched Andre in Japan or this and that, but the storyline and how emotional this man's never been slammed and all, just caught up in all of it. I loved it, and I'm born in the business, but on year 2, if you will, or about to start year 2, that was something that everything. I don't say everything, but I walked. When that show was over, I was just like, wow, and in my gut, I didn't say it at the time because it's a family business. That's what I want to be a part of. I love this business. That was a part of my fandom.
I should get it clear and straight for the record. I was sort of tongue in cheek, but Dave gave Savage and Steamboat 4.5 stars, and he gave Hogan Andre negative 4 stars. So
legit,
yeah, mm-hmm.
And that's okay. But that's Dave's what he is. He hasn't changed in 40 years, and that's okay.
He likes what he likes, and he's giving you his opinion about what he likes, and that's okay.
And that exactly, and that is the true reality of it, because I think Dave would answer this question. Okay, Dave, takes Hogan and Andre off that card. How many tickets did they sell in the Pontiac Silverdome? I don't know what his answer would be, but my gut was, I don't know. So from a business perspective, I think he would have to agree. It's just his, we'll call it the star rating mindset is unique, to say the least.
Talk to me a little bit about what your dad thought of Jim Crockett Promotions, specifically Jim Crockett Jr. But I ask because in this era, boy, we're going to see JCP start to really grow. I think the entire industry is sort of on their heels on the tail of WrestleMania about, hey, what are we going to do to compete with this?
Yes.
And so one of the things that JR understood even back then, timing's everything. So he reaches out allegedly to both Vince McMahon and JCP and says, hey, Cowboys getting out. Somebody's going to wind up with all these stations. They can really grow their syndicated network. And according to Crockett, he sees this as a real opportunity because he understands between being on TBS and the syndicated stations he already had, if he could combine forces with the network that already existed with Watts UWF, then together he would actually have more syndicated stations than Vince McMahon. And that deal is too good to pass up. So they do the deal. They make it happen. And as a result, Watts is out. Crockett's are in. The Crockett's had already sort of basically taken over Georgia Championship Wrestling in Florida by this point. We were even seeing a lot of stuff for them in central states. So they're sort of expanding, but I'm curious from your perspective, do you think your dad viewed their expansion as a threat, or how did he view what the Crockett's were trying to do? We've spent the entire time talking about how your dad viewed Vince's moves. What did your dad think of Crockett's moves, and what was his relationship there?
I think he respected all of it. It's the first time, and the timing, and I don't know if it was mid-1987 or maybe even to 88, so I don't want to pinpoint an exact time. But when this move happened, and it's clear that it's become the big two, and Lawler was his partner, and we were profitable. I think we got Pinkerton Tobacco as a tobacco sponsorship that wrote big checks. So the business was profitable. But it's the first time that old man said something to the effect, maybe there's a role where we develop talent, because my dad would say, now that is something that I know me and Lawler can do. We can take talent, put them together and figure it out. And so there was kind of shades of, and I don't want to say we're using the term now as developmental, but we'll stay here in Tennessee. We'll keep on trucking and doing what we got to do. He respected that fact. The other thing that I can just hear the echoes of this over and over and over and over. And there's some validity to this, but he'd go, okay, you take main event talent, like you just said, because I think Dundee went up, worked in the Kansas City territory. I think Steve Kern, there was some Florida back and forth. But so we'll just take Texas, Kansas, Florida, and now Louisiana and Watts. So 4 territories. His mindset was, okay, you've got a minimum of probably 20 guys that are working on top. When they get to Crockett, who in the hell is going to bump Dusty and Flair off? And who's going to bump fill in the blank A, B, C, D? So this top talent, they're going to need a place to go. So I'll take them for 2 or 3 months at a time, and we'll work that way, and then get another 2, 3 months at a time. Because how in the world are you going to, and he believed that till his passing, that at the end of the day, you can only have so many top guys, so many guys right up there close to the top, and so on and so on and so on. That was his mindset during that time, kind of the developmental. He respected the Crockett's. He had relationships with them, as they start in to the Great American Bashes. And he's like, okay, now I'm not only fighting one national promotion, I'm going to have to fight two. I'm going to, they're going to gear up and figure out what they've got to do. And as far as strategy, but he always looked at, I'll say always, but the WWF expansion was looked at probably through a different lens, much more adversarial than the territories kind of all coming together, and Crockett ended up with them all, was kind of his mindset. Not as adversarial. Of course, when they were in Memphis, he wasn't happy in other markets, but for the most part, they were friendly competition. That makes sense.
At the end of April 1987, while the WWF is a month removed from their big WrestleMania, you're going to have a big show here at the Mid-South Coliseum. It'll be you and Pat Tanaka in a steel cage match. There's between 8,000 or 9,000 fans there when the real main event gets in. It's Austin Idol versus Jerry Lawler, a hair versus steel cage match. You just alluded to this earlier. The steps were he's going to get your money refunded if Lawler wins, or we're getting a haircut. We know that someone has a key to these handcuffs. They've been hiding out under the ring all day. It's Tommy Rich. The crowd's going to go bonanza. Holly Dangerously's there. I mean, it's a near riot situation. Business is a booming here in Mid-South. And at that same time, by the way, after you've had this great match with Pat Tanaka, very quickly, you're going to be wrestling Nick Bockwinkel, who's at the time the AWA champion. You're actually going to win a singles title just a couple of weeks later. So there's great stuff happening in Memphis during this time period. Anything you want to fill in the blanks about this era? Call it late April 87.
So I'm a year in. I may be a little premature on that, but I think without saying it, there was a sense of, okay, Jarrett's kid, I was referred to in certain circles that were trying to be nice about instead of, the promoter's kid, very condescending, but kind of that mindset. Okay, I think he's in this for the long haul. He's working every night that we're running shows, and that's 6 or 7 nights a week and all that. And so I think it was Moondog Spot that I won the Mid-America title. I guess the grind, and not the grind, just the rowing of the promotion. There was still optimism in a way that, they were still at the office at my dad's house, but on the other side of it, we were still getting lots of, and this is kind of looking at it through such a micro lens, but we were getting the tapes that were coming in, and, there would be a tape of Cactus Jack Manson, and, just so lots of talent. My dad just is like, hey man, we're just going to keep on keeping on. Ratings are good. They're paying well. He probably by 87 was going to the Mid-South Coliseum. I'm not sure exactly when those conversations started playing, but my dad would look at it and go, okay, how many other tenants do you have that will run 52 nights a week in all of our building? You're not going to charge me a flat rate. You're going to be in this when I win, you win, and vice versa. See, he was making his business moves to be profitable always. He always looked at it that way. And in 87, again, just the writing on the wall of other promoters. He never said this, but he probably had the mindset, Conrad, know him like I know him. Like, all right, boys, batten down the hatches. We're in a war. And in my dad's mind, I'm going to survive this, not overtake them, but I'm going to survive this. Because when you looked at, quote unquote, the big two, he knew, okay, this is a challenge, but I still got great ratings and great relationships and building relationships. I'm just going to keep on keeping on, and that was his mindset for the next 5, 6, 7 years.
Let's talk a little bit about something else that's happening in late April that just tickled me that I totally forgot about. Or maybe I didn't ever know to begin with. The Global Wrestling Alliance. It's a fledgling promotion that is trying to offer a public stock offering. This is way back in April of 1987. And on April 21st, they're going to go public at 10 cents per share. There's 7 million shares being sold here, trying to raise $700,000. The stock price winds up opening at 30 cents per share. And a couple of weeks later, it's at 80 cents per share. This is like the craziest grift I remember seeing. What do you remember, if anything, about the Global Wrestling Alliance and an IPO? What the heck?
And I know this is probably, do you recall any of this?
No.
Conrad. So
I knew about Global Wrestling Federation. I know about Global Force Wrestling. I didn't know about this.
That's where I was going with it. Shout out, Derek, research and your team of researchers. I'm reading last night, and anyway, took Cody to the woodshed. But no, I'm reading this, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to come back to this, and kept going on this morning, finishing my cardio. Conrad, I have zero, no recollection whatsoever. I don't think I ever heard my old man talk about it either, but an IPO
for an independent wrestling organization. My goodness, this is
involved, right?
This is NFTs before NFTs were a thing. Listen, I'm not trying to be hard on them, but you can be hard on a lot of things with our friends at BlueChew.com. Our next sponsor needs no introduction. You've seen the ads. You've heard us talk about it like a million times here on the show. And I bet there's a big part of you, pun intended, that wants to try it. What am I talking about? Well, Blue Chew, of course. This isn't your grandpa's blue pill. This is the one. It's the OG chewable tablet for better sex. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers you the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in a chewable form. The process is simple. You sign up at BlueChew.com. You consult with one of their licensed medical providers. And once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door. And that means it's all online. You don't have to go to the doctor's office. You don't have to have that uncomfortable conversation. You don't even have to wait in line at the pharmacy. As a matter of fact, you can take these anytime, day or night. So plan ahead or just be ready whenever an opportunity arises. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex. So discover your options at BlueChew.com. Blue Chew wants the entire country rock hard. That's what they told me. That's the mission. They will not stop until every man is bricked up like a brick house, until every tent is pitched, until every rod is raised. Discover your options at BlueChew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code MyWorld at checkout. Just pay the $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, and the promo code is MyWorld to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. So, Jeff, let's get back into it. 1987, man. There's a lot to unpack here, but something I want to ask you about. It's not even in our research. But this is the expansion of Vince McMahon. We all know that. And a judge in the Memphis area is going to rule that due to Jerry Lawler's lawsuit against the WWF promoting Harley Race as the king of wrestling, that Harley cannot use that nickname in Tennessee, nor can he come to the ring wearing his crown and robe. This is all decided on May 20th, 1987. I'm not making any of that up. That is actually a thing that happened. What in the world? I've heard of stroke before. I've heard of being over before. But the idea that a judge looked at Vince McMahon's WWF and said, you can't come over here wearing no crown and cape. There's only one king of wrestling in Memphis. It's Tennessee. That's not a promo. That's in the state court. What in the world's going on here, Jeff? What do you remember about this?
Buddy, that was a nice little early education of trademark, IP, everything that goes with it. I mean, because Lawler, to this day, he is dialed in on the King, Jerry Lawler. And this is what's, man, just what we know now is so amazing. But to be in the locker room, you have to remember this generation. Do you think Lawler or my father or Dundee or anybody in there looked at Harley Race and didn't just I mean, shake their head in complete disgust. And I say that is because Harley was a multi-time NWA World Heavyweight Champion, held the most prestigious title in the world. He toured around. He's the real world, the real professional wrestling champion. The 10 pounds of gold before his 10 pounds, but the belt that date back to 1905. That's the guy that they're talking about, Harley. And you have sold your soul to this promotion, and now you want to be called as the king, and you know damn well sure that Jerry Lawler is the king of wrestling, and you're going to call yourself a king in the crown. Well, they lawyer drew up the papers and everything that went with it. I think, Conrad, if we read between the lines, it was a temporary injunction. But yeah, they said, no, Titan Sports, you're not coming into Memphis portraying a wrestling character known as the king. There's only one king, and his name ain't Elvis Presley, and certainly not Harley Race.
Let me remind you, this happened because on May 20th, so that's when the ruling comes down. But that night, after the sun sets, the WWF is running a municipal auditorium where we held Ric Flair's last match. And on top, there's someone standing in for Jake the Snake Roberts. He's going to be wrestling the Honky Tonk Man. But somewhere on the card, there was King Harley Race wrestling Danny Spivey. Now, the very next day, they're getting even closer to home. They're coming to the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis, Tennessee. And we just mentioned how Lawler and Tommy Rich and Austin Idol, they're selling 8,500 tickets, 9,500 tickets. So how much does the World Wrestling Federation draw just 6 weeks removed from WrestleMania III in the Mid-South Coliseum? 700. 300 shy of 1,000. This is like a Ring of Honor taping 20 years ago. 700.
In the Coliseum.
In the Mid-South Coliseum. And what jumps off the page to me is, on the one hand, I got to think, if I'm your dad, I'm so proud that I have firmly cemented in the hearts and minds of my local community what professional wrestling is supposed to be and look like. And I've created a lot of brand loyalty. And I'm reminded of people who sometimes go to lunch and they'll say, hey, I'll have a Diet Coke, but we have Pepsi. Is Diet Pepsi okay? And that person will say, no, water instead. That is what the wrestling fans in Memphis were doing. No, I'll wait till Monday. But the other part of me, the business guy in me, after I get excited about how proud your dad must have been that only 700 showed up, the other business part of me thinks how pissed he must have been at the Mid-South Coliseum. I'm renting this building from you jokers 50 times a year, and now they're going to come through, and because they got the new shiny object, you're going to rent the building to them? Do you know if there were any hard feelings with your dad in the building about renting to Vince? Or was your dad the consummate businessman who said, charge them triple, have fun, make your money?
That's a great question, man. That's one of those things I'd love to, Lawler may be able to get insight on that. I know, and this is where kind of the legalities of it. Well, Jerry, we can't hold them out. Well, yeah, you can. Well, that non-compete, and that kind of gets wishy-washy and just those, but yeah, this is pre-pyramid days, and certainly not the Forum down in Memphis. It was the only building in town. But yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the exact answer to that. What is, man, doing the deep dive here, that is going back to how did my old man look at Detroit, Pontiac Silverdome, drawing all those tickets. He looked at that originally. Oh, that's the Sheik's territory. Yeah, they're hot, but okay, what TV? So you come into our market, and Memphis was WWF was on a weak station, used just not a lot of coverage, and they drew 700 people in a building that holds 12,000. Interesting, really, 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 really interesting. In Nashville, they had much better TV. It's all about that TV, all about that coverage.
Let's talk about the coverage that happened just about a week later. Somehow, some way, on May 26th, the unthinkable happens. Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik were arrested. As a reminder, Duggan just started here in January. And now 4 months later, he's in trouble. He's arrested for being in the same car, not with the Iron Sheik. That wasn't illegal, but some say it should have been. He was arrested because they found burnt marijuana cigarettes, I believe is what was in the report. He had marijuana on his person, and we know that the Iron Sheik had cocaine, 3 grams worth, in his bag. But what got them to looking was the smell of marijuana. The bigger story is not just that we had these superstars from the WWF television who were arrested on drug charges, but we've got a consummate American hero and an evil, dastardly Iron Sheik. These guys are working each other on a pretty regular basis. They're supposed to be in a doggone blood feud. They're supposed to hate each other. Now they're in the same car together, and there's a legal document that proves it. This was a real, as silly as it sounds now in 2024 ears, a real threat to kayfabe. What did your dad think of this story when he first heard about it?
Well, and look, I can sit here today in 2024 and me and you are chuckling, but you talk about a screwed up mentality that I'm openly admitting, but I've hearing it and, oh yeah, all this makes sense. Or all this, Conrad, I can tell you that, he's got in those days, marijuana illegal for sure. And 3 grams of cocaine. Oh, they got drugs in the car. Those idiots, they're only saying they're idiots because they got caught. The real damage is you're exposing the freaking business. I mean, that's the mentality. It was major news in the dressing room to dressing room and phone call to phone call and talked about for months. And how in the hell can they do that? And oh my God, Vince McMahon, I'm sure those 2 guys will never see the light of day. And man, oh man, Jim Duggan, what a great guy. Look, years later, I got to make a lot of trips. I love Jim Duggan. He offered up and told me that story, different bits and pieces of it, but I've heard all of those kind of stories and just what he went through during the time, and obviously Sheiky Baby and all that. But in 1987, when this went down, it was major because they were working an angle, not because of the drugs, but they were working an angle, and how dare they expose the business. Crazy.
It's pretty crazy to think that Duggan is let go after this. Never appreciate he just left being a top guy with Watts because he felt like he wasn't going to make the money he could with the WWF. They have this incredible opportunity for WrestleMania III. He's a bigger star than ever. They're rocking and rolling. 6 weeks later, seemingly after WrestleMania, maybe 8 weeks, it all comes crashing down. He's arrested before he goes to the show. I think a lot of people think that happened late in the evening after a show. This is the afternoon on the way to a show. So he works in Asbury Park that night, and then he's unceremoniously shown the door. Hey, you'll never work here again, or something like that was what was said.
When was the first Royal Rumble?
January of '88.
Because Duggan.
Here's what I wanted to say though. He gets shown the door. He's out. He doesn't even come back into a WWF ring until the Paul Bosch retirement show. And I think that was probably just because he was familiar with the area. He was a big star in the area. He put over DiBiase. That was the end of August. It's mid-September before Duggan gets back up and going again. So he sits home this entire time thinking, well, I'm screwed. I've lost my opportunity. Did any of that trickle down into your dad? Like, does your dad hold a meeting and say, guys, this is a cautionary tale of what could have happened. Y'all better not be commingling, blah, blah, blah.
Him and Lawler both were sticklers on that. Yeah, as long as the territory is open, they look, and people did it and you know, had to, but it was taboo, certainly in 87. You just didn't do it, period. I remember Eddie Gilbert, so that would have been maybe 88. He's like, hey man, why don't you ride with me? And I'm just like, Eddie, like, your dad, my grandfather partners. I'm young and like, no, I'm not going down that road. He's like, oh, no, don't worry. But anyway, yeah, it was taboo for heels and baby faces to ride together. And I think pretty much across the board, and yeah, cautionary tale. And look, it's always happened in this business since they were making towns, but it was always either way under the radar or heavily discouraged.
I mean, back in the day, I've hung around with my mother-in-law enough to know that back in the day, they just hung out at one of the guys' houses. Like in the old territory days, it would be, hey, all the families go over to so-and-so's house. And then there's no public. We're in some dude's backyard, and that's how we fellowship. Speaking of fellowshipping, we're going to have a little bit of fellowshipping happening, I'm sure, because before you know it, on June 2nd, the Honky Tonk Man, who, well, he did a thing or two in Memphis. He's going to beat Ricky Steamboat to win the Intercontinental Championship at a television taping in Buffalo. And the match is actually going to air in mid-June on the syndicated Superstars show. And allegedly, this is done because Steamboat is going to be taking some time off because he's going to have the birth of his first child in July. He wants to come off the road, be more of a family guy. But I'm curious the effect that this may have had on a young Jeff Jarrett. Because now you've seen that a guy who came through Memphis, like Randy Savage, could go up there and have this opportunity and become the Intercontinental Champion. But now a guy who's related to Jerry Lawler. It doesn't get more ingrained in Memphis. From the area. First cousin. He's a part of not even really the extended family, but we'll call it the extended family. And now he's getting a big opportunity in the WWF, not just as an enhancement guy. He's the doggone Intercontinental Champion. What did a young Jeff Jarrett think about the Honky Tonk Man making it to the top of the mountain in the WWF?
So the first time that I ever laid eyes on Wayne Ferris, Conrad, I was probably 10, 11 years old, Nashville Fairgrounds. A guy that worked for my dad picked me up on Saturday afternoon, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock. We go to the wrestling matches. I'm sitting on the back of ringside. I didn't go into the dressing room at that time until after the show, till my dad got done wrestling all this. But it is Jerry Jarrett versus Tojo Yamamoto versus Larry Latham and Wayne Ferris. Larry Latham later was Moondog Spot. Wayne Ferris became the Honky Tonk Man. They were called the Blonde Bombers, and they were managed by Sergeant, who later became Nightmare Danny Davis. And Wayne was this blonde-headed, crazy-ass bad guy that was hated by everybody in the Nashville sports arena. They just were a good heel tag team. And so that was my first experience. And then, these not that too long later, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years, there he is, Lawler's first cousin. And I didn't know that at the time when I saw him as the Blonde Bomber and all this. And you see him in this gimmick, but I didn't call it. This is his new deal. He was just so impressive. And Jimmy Hart, obviously, my man Jimmy, and the relationship we had, and he'd gone off up there, and he was always spoke so highly of from my dad and my grandmother. And, he left. I just always heard, Jimmy left the right way. Randy left the right way. Just out of a ton of respect. But Honky Tonk getting this slot and getting this spot, it was, for a 19, 20-year-old Jeff Jarrett, it was, hell yeah, that's good stuff right there. Again, I'm so young in the business, and I just want to get better every night. That was my whole mindset.
As a reminder, too, the Honky Tonk Man was not always a heel. Now, of course, when we watch back, that's what we want to remember. But when he debuts in 86, they're trying to make him a Lawler-like babyface. That doesn't go as well. He pivots to heel, and man, he got white hot there. It really worked. Were there any other guys in the Memphis territory who you feel like, and you and I have spoken about the fact that there was a Memphis bias. There's a Tennessee bias. People would say, and I've heard Bruce say it a bunch, oh, that's that Memphis bullshit. That's the way people would say it. Oh, it's that Memphis shit. Oh, it's that Tennessee shit, whatever it may be. And we're talking about gimmick matches and because we're running the same territory successfully, by the way, the same people who are criticizing that Memphis bullshit, well, they're not selling very many tickets in their territory. Y'all are still selling 8,000 or 9,000 every Monday. So something's working. But with the benefit of hindsight, were there other talent that you think if given the similar opportunity to Honky Tonk Man, they could have achieved for Vince McMahon?
When you look through the years at the talent that came through Memphis, the short answer is, Conrad, the cream always rise. And that's a lesson that I've learned sometimes the hard way, but the cream always rises to the top. When you look at all the amount of talent that have come through, I mean, Dutch later in his career, Uncle Zeb and his run up there on that, Dundee, he was in his 40s, but he was still doing big box office and he had little stints here and there. But guys that should have but didn't, I can't really say that there isn't anybody because look, everybody just Sting and Warrior came through. They did their short stint there. They were super green. Sting will tell you the story. They just weren't ready. Well, they were in the process of developing, and at the time they'd kind of worn their welcome out. So again, nobody would have ever dreamed when my old man said, "Hey, we're going to have to finish you up." And then, within 18 months, Sting, and that's what's crazy in a fun way about this business. In 18 months, they're both champions in the big two companies. And my dad finished both of them up because they had been around the horn and they were just super green. But if you're going to make it, you're going to make it.
Speaking of making it, you make it. Your first time main eventing the Mid-South Coliseum was June 29th, 1987. It's you and Moondog Spot. I know that, clearly you're watching the WWF. We talked about how you watched WrestleMania, but you're on your own journey. And to be in the main event spot of the big building, it's a big vote of confidence and a lot of pressure. Again, we're talking about April of 86, the first match. Here we are 14 months later, and you're in the main event of the Mid-South Coliseum. Is this a pinch me moment for Jeff Jarrett here?
I can remember multiple times that whether Lawler was, for whatever reason, maybe as an injury angle, whatever, I hated it, Conrad. I would, the nerves killed me. Like the pressure of, wait a minute, because I'd heard my dad preach on, nope, got to have a main event. Nope, got to have a main event. No, can we get Lawler here? Nope. He would tell on the spot shows that we would run, and this is how my dad would do it, and pick up the phone, or I would hear it. He'd put it on speaker, and Conrad. So Monday was Memphis, Tuesday was Louisville, Evansville was Wednesday. On Thursdays and Fridays were spot shows. And my dad just had, one was his mother, and the one promoter was his mother. The other was his father-in-law. So both in the family. So he just had a rule that, hey, whoever calls first, you've got the date, you got to confirm it. You better have everything in motion. I don't want holds. I want confirmed dates. And once you got a confirmed date, you more or less were kind of promised Lawler. Well, many a time, one person, let's just say my grandmother got Litchfield, Kentucky on a Thursday. And Eddie Marlin goes, hey, man, Mylan really wants it. The only Thursday they can do over the next 6 months is this Thursday. My dad would say, okay, if you feel confident enough, we'll run 2 shows, same night, but Jeff's your main event. And I'm like, oh, boy, pressure's on it. So we would do song and dance on that. But when I had to main event Memphis, Louisville, or Evansville, and Nashville in those first couple of years, the pressure was on. I wasn't a big fan of it, Connie, because I was absolutely aware of my limitations in that it's a letdown. Oh, Lawler's not here, but my dad would do promotional deal. He knew that I wasn't ready, but he would, and I'm sure if we get into this card, we would probably figure a couple of different things that, okay, we don't have our top star. We got to give them 3 or 4 other reasons to be there. So it was fun. I look back on it, the learning lessons, the learning tree. 87, Conrad, we literally could make 4 or 5 podcasts out of this. Cause I mean, we're getting it at I think we're into our second, maybe getting into our 3rd hour. I don't even think we're really got into June because the RPM. There's so many things we haven't touched on, but I don't get too far ahead. But this is the good stuff that when I look back, Conrad, we're just finishing the end of my first year in reality.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you're the end of April is you finishing your first year, and we're going to go ahead and finish our conversation about 1987 today. There's no way to fit it all into one episode, so we'll pivot. We'll come back and talk about the Nasty Boys. We'll talk about, Jim Crockett Promotions running a big pay-per-view, and then Vince McMahon creating a pay-per-view to rival it. I mean, it's been called the sabotage of Starrcade. We'll talk about all that and a lot more here at myworldpod.com. That's your home for all things Jeff Jarrett. If you haven't already, go hit the subscribe button. It's totally free at myworldpod.com. That's our YouTube. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. Jeff and I plan to go live in the month of August. And there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of fun places to catch The Last Outlaw, including, I can't believe this is real. There's been a song that started to go a little viral across the pond. And I can't help but wonder, Jeff, are people overlooking Bryan Danielson? Because we know that you're wrestling him tomorrow night in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, live on AEW Dynamite, 7 Central, 8 Eastern on TBS. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat is going to be there as a special guest. This is going to be a special show. And that happens tomorrow night. So be sure to tune into TBS. But at the end of the month, a lot of people are campaigning to have you be a part in a major way of the Wembley show, including a friend of ours, as I like to say here on the program, Mr. Campbell, who created a little bit of a song.
Not my friend.
No, not your friend, but I'll count him. I'm rounding up. I'm polite. I'm in Alabama. I round up.
Okay.
I'm going to claim Mr. Campbell because I think this song is pretty doggone catchy. He's got it over on his social media. We can't show you the video, but we can darn sure let you hear the new tune that's sweeping the nation about our pal Double J.
Hey, Tony Khan, you coward. Book Jarrett versus Hangman Page. Hey, Tony Khan, you coward. Make Wembley Stadium the stage. Jeff been shown such disrespect. Over the line, that anxious cowboy step. Tom Campbell's best friend must make things right in Wembley Stadium on a Sunday night. He's the all-in crowd, all breathless, with a great British guitar necklace. Hey, Tony Khan, you coward. Book Jarrett versus Hangman Page. Hey, Tony Khan, you coward. Book Jarrett versus Hangman Page.
Well, listen, from his lips to God's ears, I've got late breaking news. I actually got a text message during the show, and I'm not making this up. This is 100% true. I mean it. I got a text message from Taylor Swift's people, because I'm your people. And I know that y'all go way back when she used to babysit the children. She was your babysitter. She worked by the hour for Jeff Jarrett. Those are facts. And I've been told that her camp has reached out through our attorney. I'll just throw him out there. Our attorney received a request for Taylor to cover that. So there may be, what if all the Swifties started campaigning and we heard from Taylor Swift next week here on the program?
It's kind of a catchy tune. It's got the right riff. I mean, AI is a beautiful thing.
What if and she's going to be there the night before, as you recall, doing a concert. Do you think there's a chance?
Would you stop
that old Tay-Tay can get Mr. Kelsey to help have your back? Maybe Travis Kelsey could be your heater and she could sing your theme song to The Way to the Ring or something like that.
Oh, hey, that's not bad.
Just saying.
Yeah. Oh, Kelsey, maybe I'll throw him some tights and boots. I'll pack an extra pair.
Why not?
Never know.
And check it out, myworldpod.com. We'll have all this and more next week. We're going to pick up our conversation about 1987 in the future. We've got a lot of really cool stuff on the calendar. I don't know what you've seen or haven't seen, but we're going to be talking Kevin Nash in TNA. That's right. Big Sexy had quite the run in TNA, and we're going to be examining it and a whole lot more. Get your questions in right now at myworldpod.com. That's myworldpod.com. If you'd like to interact with the show online, that's easy to do. It's at myworldpod on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Jeff, I never know what to expect when we sit down and click record, but we heard about you taking Cody to the woodshed. We heard about what's happening tomorrow night with you and Bryan Danielson. We heard from Taylor Swift's people. They're looking to get in on the Double J train. And we talked about 1987, sprinkled a little SummerSlam in there. This was a fun visit under the learning tree. Don't sue us, Mr. Jericho, but I had fun with that today, Jeff.
And when I read the research, I said, this is about right for a 2-hour episode. Conrad, we didn't get halfway through it. Either I'm long-winded or a little of both. That was fun. It's a blast. I appreciate everybody listening, tuning in. When we get into the end of this, as the wrestling junkie in me, the Survivor Series, Starrcade, drama, when you think about what happened then, Conrad, it is a real eye-opener on the mentality of both promoters.
Can't wait to dig into it more. 1987 is an interesting time. This was a lot of fun. Maybe we'll do some more years like this, but we're going to end it here. Go hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell, and tune in next week right here on My World.
Peace.
SaveWithConrad.com.
My name is Doug Gustafson, and we are from Columbus, Ohio. First learned of Conrad through his podcast network. I'm a big 83 Weeks fan. Probably got into a little bit more credit card debt than what we wanted to during the course of the pandemic. We wanted to get rid of some of that. My wife and I had luckily bought the house many years ago and had quite a bit of equity built up in it. We are looking to actually redo our bathroom, things around the house that we wanted to do with the other equity that we have left over. We've been talking about refinancing forever, and I finally just took the plunge and called the number, got a hold of him, and from start to finish, it was just fantastic. I had Diane within the day. The communication with her was fantastic. The process moved quicker than I could have ever hoped. My name's Doug Gustafson from Columbus, Ohio. I ended up saving $800 a month with Save with Conrad, and am able to also update our bathroom.
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender.
SaveWithConrad.com.